We're here for another evening interview with the candidates, and I have with me Judge Ken Meyers, councilman candidate for City of Mount Vernon City Council. Judge, good to see you. If you'd like, introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, and why you're running for City Council.
My name is Ken Meyers. I've resided in Mount Vernon for 40 years. My wife of 48 years passed away in 2012, and I'm now married to Mindy Bumpus Meyers, who's lived here all of her life. I think a lot of people know Mindy. We had 4 children we raised here. Ed Brian Cook, Craig Cook, Angie Myers Canary, and Greg Myers. They were all raised, went to school here.
Okay.
40 years as a judge. I was appointed in 1975 as a magistrate judge, and I was at that time one of the youngest federal judges in the United States. I was assigned to the Marion Penitentiary. I wasn't an inmate. I held court there, and actually we held court in the penitentiary because of security concerns. Marion Penitentiary at that time was the only level 6 penitentiary in the United States, the most secure prison in the United States. Having spent 11 years doing that, I had the opportunity to be elevated to the job of Chief United States Bankruptcy Judge for the Southern District of Illinois, and I took that position. And I retired in 2009, but I stayed on as an unpaid senior judge until 2015 when I retired from that position. The reason I'm running is I was approached by a number of people to run for this office, and they asked me to run. I was somewhat hesitant at first. And then I realized that the city of Mount Vernon, and actually this country, has been good to me. And I felt it was my civic duty to take on the responsibilities to run and perhaps help the city with some of the problems that they have. I was raised in a little town called Neoga, Illinois, which is about 75 miles north of here, north of Effingham, south of Mattoon. And that's where I was raised. I went to school at Eastern Illinois University. My parents didn't have very much money. I commuted back and forth, paid my way through school. I always said I was ahead of my time. I brown bagged it to school because I couldn't afford to pay for my lunch. And at that time, brown bagging it was somewhat embarrassing that you couldn't even afford to pay for your lunch. I worked my way through Eastern. I have had a multitude of jobs. If I listed them for you, you'd think I was 110 years old, and I guarantee I'm not that old. I went to law school at Indiana University, sometimes known as Bobby Knight's School of Law. And I graduated from there in 1969. When I was appointed magistrate in 1975, I came to Southern Illinois. The duty station was Benton, Illinois, because that's where the federal court facility is. And I established the first full-time magistrate's office in Benton, Illinois. As a bankruptcy judge, I moved the office from Alton, which I felt was too close to East St. Louis, and I moved that bankruptcy facility to Benton to better serve the citizens of Southern Illinois, who usually had to go to East St. Louis for court. I established that in it was about 1986, or right around there, 87, that we established that facility in Benton. As a bankruptcy judge, I moved the office, like I say, to Southern Illinois, and also modernized the filing system. In the bankruptcy court, we went to electronic filing. We're one of the first courts in the United States to do so. And the system has worked out extremely well. I am currently a member of the Police and Fire Commission here. And I just might add that tonight I'd like to, I know Robert's given me the list of questions, and I'm not a knee-jerk person. I like to analyze the problem. I like to consider all sides of the problem before making a decision. I have one caveat that I want to raise a lot of the issues so that the public understands all sides of some of these disputes which are occurring. I don't make knee-jerk decisions, and I'm not going to say anything here tonight just to get your vote. If you're looking for somebody I could tell you that if I'm elected, I'm going to build a new stadium and we're going to bring the Cardinals here. But if I can't perform, then I'm not interested in making that statement. So what I'm telling you is many of these issues I have not reached a final decision on because I don't think I've thoroughly investigated them. But I hope maybe what I have to say tonight will give you some idea where I'm coming from on some of the issues.
Very good. Okay, so the list of the questions we begin with, we hear a lot about transparency. It seems communication is lacking when it comes to governing boards. What is your plan? What is your commitment to ensure that any actions you propose is clearly communicated to the citizens of Mount Vernon?
What I'd like to see is, I don't know whether you call them forums or open meetings, when you come to a major issue like the 7th Street or the water issue, I think we ought to have a separate forum where people are given the opportunity to speak at length, maybe with regard to their concerns and their positions on the issues. And I think this may take care of another problem that is raised quite frequently, and that is the limitation on the amount of time that is now allotted in the city council meetings. I personally think 5 minutes is not enough time, but I also believe that you have to maintain some decorum in these proceedings and not let this get to be a shouting match. I think you could have a forum, you could then give people the opportunity to express themselves at length, and then you could run a city council meeting maybe with some limitation on speech, but not at 5 minutes. The only problem with the forum that I found in some of these open meetings is attendance, and I'm not sure how we solve that problem where we get more people involved, more people to attend, more people to input into the issues. For example, just to give you an example, we're talking about 7th Street, and again, let me reiterate, and I want to reiterate, I may raise some points and you may say, well, he's going this way on the issue, or he's going that way. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying some of the things that have been raised to me that I was unaware of, and I want to share with you for whatever purpose they might serve. The problem with 7th Street, there was a workshop in September of 2012 where presentations were made concerning the benefits of the closure and what was being done. In fact, and I don't know how many people attended that, but I didn't hear much about 7th Street until the last year or so, I think. So I don't know where that got lost. Also in the paper, I dug up some old papers, and there was actually front page pictures of heavy equipment down there working on that railroad crossing at the time. Now, I'm not sure how we can get people involved. I think we can do more with the newspaper. A lot of these issues, I don't really find out about them myself until after they've been discussed. We need to be open. I think we need to be open to suggestions from the community. What I like, we've got a vast community of knowledge here. I always said, I did all kinds of jobs. Some of them were menial jobs. There's something you can learn from everybody. There's something you can learn from everybody. And we've got a lot of talented people, professional people, tradespeople, common workers. I say common, I don't mean that demeaning, but trying to encompass all of the hands-on working people. We need their input. The city council and the mayor do not have a monopoly on ideas. And I think we can get a lot of ideas from the community. So that's, I think, what I would say on transparency. I think we needed some way to get information out about these issues, but not just one side of the issue, all sides of the issue. And then I think we'll be in a better position to make a decision that's in the best interest of the citizens and of the city of Mount Vernon.
Okay. So the next question is, what are your priorities when it comes to infrastructure?
Well, I think the main priority right now, as I see it, is the water situation. I spent some time at City Hall, again, just trying to get a feel myself for what was going on. There's a lot wrong with this water system. How severe it is, I don't know that we know yet. There's been some work in-house to determine the degree of the problem. There's been some people who have advocated that we get an independent survey. We've got to find out how severe it is, I think, until we can find out where we're at. A few things you can find out, though. I think it's been demonstrated that this is something that hasn't just happened recently. It's through decades of neglect. We've got a water tower, an optic water tower, which I understand is down by the high school or someplace down there. I'm not sure. It's not an optic, I don't believe. Nothing's been done on that water tower for 30, 40 years. I don't think we even know what the condition of that is. There's a 20% loss of water, that's wholesale loss, $400,000 of water loss each year. There were 66 water leaks on 12th Street. The meters are aging, and I'm talking to people in the water department. The problem with aging meters are they don't speed up, they slow down. So they cause your water revenue to go down. I couldn't get an exact number of the meters that needed to be replaced. There's, I think, 5,600 meters. I think there's 1,000 commercial meters. And I don't know how many of those exactly need to be replaced immediately, at least in are more urgent. In Perkins, I know if you watched the paper, there was a sewer collapse, and as I understand it, every time they tried to patch the sewer, it collapsed more. The city building had a big leak, water leak. I think that, and what I think if we could get some of these leaks resolved and get some of this revenue back that we should be getting, then I think the problem with the water meter fee could resolve itself. By having more income coming in, there wouldn't be the necessity for that the water meter fee. And I think on that, and I strongly have advocated this, that's something that should be open to review at all times. Find out where we're at. Find out how much more revenue we're getting with these, with the leakage being stopped, with the problems that are being resolved. Are we getting more revenue? And I think that could resolve the meter fee. The other thing that I learned too is after 2:30 in the afternoon, people working on these problems are paid overtime. And that's a considerable expense to the city. And I think that's something we should look at. And I think that's something also, the more of these problems that are resolved, the less overtime you're going to have. I would look for other sources to pay for this meter fee. I'd be happy to look at the budget and look at the, look at the financial figures and see if there's anything else we can do. I know this is something that's a grave concern to the people, and I understand that. And I think it needs to be reviewed periodically. And I think there's some people say leave it on. I'm not sure you need to leave it on if it's not necessary. Then it becomes just an additional tax. I think that's, I think, like I said, we get a better picture of the financial situation with regard to the water once we get a better understanding of how severe the problem is.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next question then leads into the other half. We hear about infrastructure, then what are your priorities when it comes to quality of life?
I mentioned the other night when the Mount Vernon Business Women's Club had their talk that 6 months ago I might have had a different picture of quality of life. Quite to my amazement, as I've gone around and talked to people, the number one topic among many young people is quality of life. And the young people are the future of Mount Vernon. It's a broad topic. What money is spent under the heading of quality of life. It's not just sidewalks and bike trails or walking paths. It's demolition of certain properties. You're talking about our parks, the shelter replacements and the tables that are needed in the park. It's part of housing. It's part of the industrial park development. The aquatic zoo, it's quite controversial, but many of the young people were enthused about it. And it also involved some of the high school infrastructure. So I think it's a broader topic than just saying it's sidewalks and bike trails. But I think everything is subject to review. Quality of life, like everything else, is subject to review and spending restraint is the only thing I can say. But I think I'm more convinced that quality of life is an important element in this community as well as many of the other things. And so that's kind of where my position is on quality of life.
Okay. There's much discussion about the amount of debt that the city has accrued in the past 8 years. Whether you agree with what the money has been spent on, what is your plan to ensure that it's paid back? And as an joiner to this, have you identified any other potential ways that this debt could be paid back sooner or the bond debt be retired?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of the revenue shortfall, as you well know, I'm sure, is the sales tax revenues have declined drastically. The 1% state sales tax is down, the 1% home rule tax is down, the state income tax receipts are down. I think this has been a great deal of the problem with regard to the debt. Is it an anomaly? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows at this point. It's not just unique to Mount Vernon. I looked at Centralia, Marion, Effingham have all seen a decline in sales tax revenue. We need to find out why this is happening and see if there's anything we can do about it. Now, as to what you do about it, I don't know that I've reached a conclusion, or maybe I'm not smart enough to figure it out yet, but I certainly am willing to work on it. Again, I can promise you the moon, but it may not happen. One of the proposals that I've seen bandied around is that you combine the 2010 bond with the 2012 bond and you get a lower rate. The 2010 bond is 3.4% interest. The 2012 bond is 3.6% interest. I'm not a bond expert, but asking around, the knowledge I can get is the bond rates are now between 3.6 and 4%. So I'm not confident how combining those and seeking that you're going to be able to seek a lower interest rate. I mean, we all know if you watch things and you watch the Fed, interest rates are on the rise. They're not going down. So I'm not sure that I can indicate right now what I could do to help. I think you need to look at the budget and see where we stand.
Okay. So another hot topic that's being discussed is the Armory. The Armory is a hot topic as the state of Illinois has offered to put $1.5 million into this facility so long as the city puts an additional $500,000 into it. What is your stance on this facility?
My stance is very simple on this one, and maybe it's too simplistic. I don't know. I've got two questions to ask. If we put the $500,000 into this building, along with the $1.5 million from the state, what do we have? What do we have? Do we have a completed, usable building that we can use for many purposes, or do we have a half-built building that is going to require another couple of $1 million to complete? That's the first question I have. Let's assume that you answer the first question, that you're going to have a complete, usable building. Then the second question I have is this financially sustainable? How are you going to fund this building? How are you going to pay for upkeep? Who's going to pay the utilities? What are the utilities going to be on this building? Just anything that you might consider in your own home as an expense. I think those are things that we have to look at too. A lot of people have shown interest in it, using it, and I'm sure we can get a lot more people interested in using it, but is it going to pay? Are they going to pay for using it? And is it going to be enough to make it sustainable? And I think some of the things that have been suggested too would require maybe more supervision, more police presence. What's that going to cost? I think we need to find out what the cost is going to be after the building is completed, if we conclude that the $2 million will result in a completed building. I'm not sure of that. I've heard various statements concerning that. Some people say it will be a usable, completed building. Other people have estimated that it may take another $1 million, $2 million to complete it. So I think we have to find answers to these questions before I can reach a result as to what my position is.
We hear a lot about growth, both in jobs and population. What is your plan for each and your priority in addressing these?
Well, I think first thing we have to look at is housing. As far as the population is concerned, the other complaint I heard a lot about was property taxes. I'm not sure how much can be done on that. I think also that to make the community attractive, to have people live here, I think it's also a matter of aesthetics, the looks. We have to have an attractive community. And I think there's a lot of things that we could do to make this city more attractive that wouldn't cost any money. The community gardens are one thing. I think there are some ideas that I have on beautification downtown Mount Vernon that'll cost the city absolutely not one penny. I think that could be done just to make the downtown look more attractive. I don't like the connotation of Southtown. I think it has a negative connotation. I always say that a city's kind of like a person. You break a leg and you damage the whole body. And I think that's the way what happens in Southtown happens to the city. We need to encourage small business, I think, as far as growth is concerned, and work with small business and do what we can to encourage them and not throw up any hurdles to them. Work with them. Work as a partner with them to encourage their business, not to give them a bunch of conditions that they must need to fulfill. I think that's a thing we can do. I think you really got to look at small business. General Tire is a great business in this community. I can't say enough about General Tire. When I lived in Danville, there was a big plant in Westville, General Motors foundry factory. It moved out and destroyed Danville. So I think we need to encourage small businesses, small industry, small businesses that pay good wages.
Okay. Speaking of the city and what they do, the city makes financial commitments to various entities. What are your commitments or thoughts on the Jefferson County Development Corporation, the Downtown Development Corporation, and the Convention and Tourism Department? Do you personally prefer a public-private structure or strictly governmental structure?
I've looked a little bit at JCDC, and I must admit I don't have enough knowledge of that organization or the Downtown Development or the Bureau, the Visitors Bureau. But I do see, and I looked on the website for JCDC, and I think they do provide kind of a bridge between business and city. And I like the idea of a public-private partnership. I think you get I noticed there are a lot of the businesses in the community that support JCDC and also downtown development and the tourism. And I think you need that kind of relationship to get those businesses involved in the community. But all these things are open as far as I'm concerned. All these things are open to investigation. And I think they're all open to considering the finances and how that fits into the budget. There's nothing off the table as far as I'm concerned when we're considering expenditures. And I must admit, I think I need to look into it a little more thoroughly before I can really reach a conclusion on that.
Okay. So you're on the Police and Fire Commission, so this might be a question specially suited for you. We hear a lot about unfunded pension liabilities, especially in this great state of Illinois. With that in mind, we know that our own fire and police pensions are currently underfunded. What is your plan to address this if duly elected?
Well, fortunately, the Police and Fire Commission doesn't deal with pensions.
Oh, okay. Well, now I'm educated. How about that?
It only deals with hiring and filing and promotions. That's basically what we deal with. We really have nothing to do with pensions. I understand there's an unfunded liability for pensions. The way I understand it, the city is advised, I think, on a yearly basis of how much they need to contribute to the pension fund in order to keep it funded. I've been told, and I guess I've been told this by city officials, that they think the unfunded pension problem will resolve itself in 4 or 5 years, that they are going to actually catch up. I'm just saying what has been told to me. Again, I do not like to make decisions until I'm fully informed, and I must admit I've got some learning to do, you might say, on that issue.
Fair enough. Okay. You spoke to this as part of your opening, or as part of the transparency question, but we've been hearing a lot about the issue of 7th Street, the closure of 7th Street for the rail transfer operations. Where do you stand on this and why? Well,
again, I'm open. I would like to point out a few things that I think have not been disclosed, or not disclosed recently at least, concerning 7th Street. In 2012, JCDC employed IMS Worldwide Inc. to perform a study concerning the railroad traffic through Mount Vernon. That study concluded that this city was in a unique position. They were at that time talking about 3 railroads converging here, but they needed to be connected in order for it to be attractive as far as the city is concerned, with attracting industry and also servicing the industry it had here. They said there was great potential for intermodal and transloading operations. And I didn't know what these terms meant, but transloading means basically you bring in a boxcar and you unload it and put it onto a semi or something of that nature. Intermodal is when you see these containers are on container ships from China and they are actually offloaded as a container onto a semi. I think there's been some transloading done down at that facility. But after the study, Ron Nybert, who was the city manager at that time, and the railroad approached the Milanos about the potential of railroad traffic to their facility. The only place you could interconnect them was at Milanos. That was the only place they could be interconnected. There's five major Class 1 railroads in the United States. A Class 1 railroad is one that has a revenue of more than $250 million. Now with the connectivity that they have at Milanos, all five of those railroads are connected together. Something very unusual. I've heard maybe 3 places in the United States where this happens. There are some things I think you need to consider too about closing the street, and just from a logistical perspective. The railroad apparently spent about $500,000 on this project. It didn't cost the city or it didn't cost Milanos anything to put this switching operation in. You can't just take your blowtorch and your sledgehammer and go out there and take these barricades down. The city and Milanos have a contract, which the city officials tell me has not been breached. I've reviewed the contract. I don't know the facts that have occurred to whether it's been breached or not. That's your first problem. They've got a contract. And are you prepared to pay Milanos for the damages that they might incur as a result of opening this up? And actually, let me tell you, there was a study done before this crossing was closed, and 70% of the traffic was to Milanos. 30% was divided between school kids and regular traffic. So the first hurdle you've got is with Milanos and the city having a contract. Are you willing to go to court and try to break that contract? Spend money for attorney's fees to do that? What's that going to cost? And then what about, well, let's assume that Milanos would enter into an agreement. Because I've been told, again, and some of this is what I've been told, and I want to stress the fact that I haven't investigated all of it myself personally, and I want to do some more study. But I've been told by Milanos that actually their trucks have to do a jig-jag now to get out of there, that it has not created a convenient situation for their travel through that area. But let's assume that you reach an agreement with Milanos, and they say, okay, take the barricades down as far as we're concerned. Then you have to deal with the railroad. And I'll tell you one thing, early on in my career, I was in a contest with the railroad on a railroad crossing, trying to open a crossing. They will fight. They will fight you at every turn. They will fight you in front of the Illinois Commerce Commission, as you know, because of the liability situation, frankly. And they will, if that doesn't work, they will fight you in court. What about other costs? First of all, you got the railroads invested $500,000. Is there a possibility that the city could be liable for that amount if they open up this crossing? I've seen figures too, that crossing lights, let's assume that you get past all of this and you're now ready to open it up. Gates, estimated cost of new gates, $275,000. Grade work, $75,000 to do that. Also, the contract with Milanos provides that there's no switching between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. I did look at the contract with Milanos. It provides no switching between 6 a.m. and p.m. If you avoid the contract, then that's open. Now you've got gates, because it's a switching area and there's more activity now than there used to be. How often are the gates going to be down? These are just things I think you ought to consider. They need to be taken into consideration. And I'm not eliminating the inconvenience. I've heard from friends, I've heard from my wife, I've heard from a lot of people who are inconvenienced by this. I want to hear it from the Mount Vernon residents. I want to talk to the business people who claim that they have lost money as a result of this. I think those things need to be taken into consideration also. But I just think we ought to be fully informed rather than just saying, well, I'm going out there tomorrow with a torch and a sledgehammer and knock the gates down.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please tell us what you see as the strengths and opportunities that this city currently has and what you will do to build on these.
Well, I think the strengths are that I think we have room for, now with the new industrial park, we have room for industrial expansion. I think we have a good work ethic in this community. I think that's one thing that's attractive. I think 64 and veterans is another strength that we have. We have good hospitals, good schools. These are all attractive things. And I think we need to work on, again, attracting small businesses into the industrial park. We need to work on the 64 Veterans Interchange and develop that area. And I think that will then help the city with a lot of things, including additional revenue.
All right. So with strengths and opportunities come weaknesses and threats. What do you see as weaknesses and threats facing Mount Vernon, and what will you or try to do to address these?
Well, I think some of these I've already mentioned, and I think one of the weaknesses and threats that we have is the lack of medium-priced housing. I think the southern part of the city is a negative. I think we need to improve that. We need better communication between public and city officials with the public. We need community involvement in order to solve these problems. You know, and I think that we just need to attract people back to the community. I think that's one of the big weaknesses we have now. We haven't attracted people back, and we need them living here rather than one of these other 100 zip codes that we have.
Okay. So the final question is, the seat you're running for is being vacated by the incumbents, one of which who is running for mayor. There is also another sitting city councilman who is running for mayor. If you are elected to one of these two available seats, are you prepared to work with whoever is elected? And how will you do this if your view differs from theirs?
Absolutely, I can work with them. I can work with anybody. For a good part of the 40 years of my experience, many times we were in negotiations over settlements of legal issues. And I think you can bring people together. Maybe some of these issues can be compromised. You give a little, I'll give a little, and we can compromise some of these things. If it's not something that can be compromised, then it's not that I won't work with them. I just might not vote with them. But other than getting along, one thing about lawyers, they argue in the courtroom, but once they leave the courtroom, they're friends. So, I mean, that's the way I look at the city council. You know, we may argue in the city council, but as far as I'm concerned, when we walk out the door, we're friends.
Okay. So, in closing, is there anything else you would like to add or say to the people that will be watching as far as it concerns your candidacy for the city council?
No, I'd just like for them to, you know, to consider my qualifications and consider what I've said, and I would hope they'd vote for me. I'm doing it as a public service. One thing I might add, and I don't want to say this as a matter of getting votes, but I have any intention of taking any compensation. If I'm forced to take compensation from the city, it'll go to charity. The compensation doesn't matter to me. I'm doing it as part of my civic duty.